Heads up, this podcast isn't therapy. It's bold, blunt, and irreverent, but it's not a substitute for professional help. Full disclaimer is in the blurb below. Hi, it's Annie. So welcome back to Path Alchemy, and today I'm going to do an episode on ex-revival syndrome. This is a juicy one for a relationship autopsy. You know those people digging up the past, rekindling old flames, and convincing themselves that this time it'll be different, only to end up reenacting the very same old script. Surprise, surprise. So there is a particular madness that grips people after a breakup, and it should come with a warning label. It is the urge to resurrect the dead. You know what I'm talking about. The text to the ex at midnight, the coffee to just catch up, the we've both changed, maybe it will work this time delusion. So welcome to ex-revival syndrome. So picture it. You've buried the relationship, you have wept, you've sworn never again, you've deleted the photos, and then one lonely Tuesday, they slide into your DMs with a casual, "Hey, how have you been?" Suddenly you're digging up the grave with your bare hands, convinced that this Walking Dead romance is going to come back to life better than ever. It never does. Corpses do not age well, they decay. But the fantasy of the revival is intoxicating. The idea that maybe you can rewind, undo the heartbreak, and get the happy ending that never happened. It is a psychological hall of mirrors, part nostalgia and part self-sabotage, part straight-up masochism. So ex-revival syndrome is the autopsy of relationships that should stay dead, but keep clawing their way back out of the soil. So let's take a look at the anatomy of ex-revival syndrome. Like any good pathology, ex-revival has stages. Stage 1 is the trigger. So this one starts innocently. You see their name pop up on social media, you pass their car outside Super Value, your mate casually mentions that they were asking about you, and suddenly the corpse twitches. What was firmly buried now looks strangely alive. So stage 2 is the fantasy. Your brain starts writing a rom-com. You imagine they've matured, you picture candlelight dinners where you both apologise for the past. You script an entirely fictional version of events where all the old wounds have magically healed. In this fantasy, you forget the 3 months they stonewalled you, the Christmas they ruined, the way you cried yourself sick. Selective amnesia sets in. It's like looking at a highlight reel edited by a drunk, weirdly twisted Cupid. And then we have stage 3, the reunion. So you decide to meet for coffee or drinks or just one chat, and instantly it's like slipping into an old coat, an old hoodie, an old tracksuit, familiar, intoxicating, deceptively warm. You remember why you fell in love, the charm, the humour, the chemistry. You also conveniently forget why you fell out of it. Neuroscience explains this. It's old attachment pathways lighting up like twinkle lights. The body remembers. Desire doesn't die neatly just because common sense told it to. And then we've got stage 4, the collapse. Here comes reality. The coat that felt snug at first now scratches, the same patterns resurface, the same silences, the same rows, the same avoidance, the same control, and possibly the same betrayal. And you're left wondering, how did I fall for this again? That's the cruel punchline of ex-revival syndrome. You're not dating a new person, you're dating the same person. And the worst part, you knew it. Deep down, you absolutely knew, but the fantasy of revival was too delicious to resist. That's the anatomy. The trigger, the fantasy, the reunion, and the collapse. Every single time, like clockwork. So why do people do this? Why do intelligent, self-aware adults go crawling back to the very person who shredded them? Freud had a term for it, repetition compulsion. I've talked about it in other episodes. So the mind tries to replay old wounds in the hope that this time the ending will be different. It's like a naive child rereading the same sad story, convinced that if they flip the pages carefully enough, the horrible ending won't come. The sadness at the end will somehow change. And unfortunately, it doesn't. So attachment theory adds another layer. If your early template of love was inconsistent, a parent who sometimes soothed and then sometimes vanished, then your nervous system associates unpredictability with passion. That's why your ex, with their hot and cold routine, still makes your heart race. It's not chemistry, it's trauma dressed up as some kind of twisted desire. And then there's the fantasy bond. Robert Firestone coined the term for when people mistake the idea of a relationship for the reality. You're not reviving the ex. You're reviving the fantasy of what you wanted it to be. You're clinging to the hope that if you work hard enough, if you wait long enough, if you sacrifice enough, it'll somehow transform into the fairy tale, except it never does. You're not falling in love with them again, you're falling in love with the ghost of who you thought they could be. And let's not forget the role of shame. So going back to an ex can feel like redemption. It's like you think if they take you back, maybe you weren't so unlovable after all. Maybe you weren't such a fool. Maybe the breakup wasn't proof of your inadequacy. The tragedy is that the validation lasts about as long as the coffee, and then the old patterns kick the door back in. So, psychodynamically, ex-revival syndrome is a cocktail of compulsion, attachment wounds, fantasy bonds, and shame. It's far less about romance and more about neurosis. So you're not rekindling love, you're reenacting trauma. And ex-revival syndrome isn't just psychodynamics, it's cultural too. We are all drenched in nostalgia, so Ireland practically marinates in it. Sure, he wasn't that bad, your auntie says at Christmas. Friends half joke, go on, give her another chance, it's grand. We love a comeback story. And Hollywood has also been spoon-feeding us the same script for decades. The rom-com where the couple split, learn life lessons and reunite for the big kiss in the rain. Nobody makes films about the reality, the awkward coffee, the recycled arguments, the second collapse that feels twice as humiliating. And social media doesn't help either. An ex can reappear with one like on your photo and suddenly the dopamine hits harder than a pint on an empty tummy. That tiny drip of attention convinces you the story isn't over. People confuse nostalgia for destiny, comfort for chemistry, and memory for meaning. And here's the note that matters. Not every ex-revival is toxic. Sometimes people circle back, not because of wounds, but because of familiarity. Maybe the relationship ended for practical reasons, distance, timing, work stress, and nobody betrayed anyone. In those cases, going back can feel like slipping into the safe arms after wandering in a storm. The X is a known quantity. Familiar routines, private jokes, the comfort of someone who already knows how you take your tea, or your coffee for that matter. There is a deep human hunger for familiarity. Novelty excites, but familiarity soothes. After heartbreak, loneliness, or failed rebounds, people sometimes choose the X, simply because it feels like home. And that can be benign, even healing, if both individuals have truly grown. The danger is when comfort becomes a shortcut, when familiarity disguises avoidance of risk or growth. The past feels safe because it's known, but safe isn't always the same as right. So yes, sometimes ex-survival is trauma, sometimes it's fantasy, and sometimes it's just homesickness for someone you used to belong to. So what's the language of collapse? Every ex-revival ends with the same handful of lines, and they're always crueler than the first time around. I thought it would be different this time. Translation: I ignored every red flag and convinced myself nostalgia was gross. Oh, you haven't changed at all. Translation: I hoped you'd become the person I fantasized about, but you're still you. Oh, we gave it another try. Translation, we repeated the same mistakes with bonus amounts of shame. And then, of course, the silence, the ghosting, the sudden fade out, as though the revival was just a late night experiment gone wrong. The collapse is always sharper because you don't just lose them again, you lose the fantasy of second chances. And the cost. Well, the cost of ex-revival syndrome is heavy. You don't just mourn the relationship, you mourn your own hopefulness. You sit with shame, thinking, how on earth did I fall for this again? And friends don't always sympathise either. They roll their eyes, remind you that they warned you, and you're left grieving in private. It kind of feels like a self-inflicted wound, which only deepens the pain. There is also the cost of time. Months upon months wasted on the same loop when you could have been moving forward. Growth stalled, new connections postponed, your life on pause, waiting for a miracle, some kind of rewrite of Act 1 that never comes. And worst of all, you betray yourself. Every time you resurrect a dead relationship, you send your nervous system the message, "Ooh, my comfort matters more than my dignity." And that self-abandonment eats away at confidence and corrodes trust in your own judgment. So let's summarize the autopsy report. Cause of death, repetition compulsion, nostalgia, and selective amnesia. Manner of death, relapse into old wounds disguised as romance. Contributing factors, dopamine hits from texts, cultural obsession with second chances, and the human craving for familiarity. Here's the truth. Going back to an ex doesn't mean you're weak, it means you're human. The urge for revival is universal. The fantasy of undoing heartbreak, of rewriting history, of finally getting the love you deserved. But the fantasy is not the reality. And guess what? Reality will always win. Exes are exes for a reason. If you revive what was dead, you'll usually end up grieving twice. The only thing harder than the first breakup is the sequel, so mourn it, bury it, honor what it was, but don't dig it back up. The Walking Dead never ages all that well. So that's today's episode. I'm Annie. Have a really great day.